Is your marketing based on a strategy or is it based on hope?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. I'm AnnieLaurie Walters.
And I'm Steve Phipps, and we are incredibly glad that you are here to join us again.
If you caught episode 1, we introduced the Guide Marketing Framework, Wayfind's system for helping B2B CEOs stop spinning their wheels and actually grow with clarity and confidence.
Today, we are diving into the first letter of the framework, the Guide framework, and that's the letter G. I feel like Sesame Street there for a minute, but it's generate your story and your strategy. And of course, this is near and dear to me, but this is where it all starts.
It is, because wishing and hoping and thinking and praying is not a strategy. It's helpful, but it's not a strategy, is it? Okay, so let's dive in. This is the first letter in the Guide framework. We start here. Why do we start here? Why do we start with generating your strategy usually?
And let me say this to you, if you're just tuning in and this is the first episode you're catching, go back to the first episode because that's where we go over the entirety of the framework and provide an overview. Yes. The reason that we start here is because that intro question is based on the quote by Vince Lombardi, the famous football coach, who is quoted as saying, hope is not a strategy. And yet, a lot of times what ends up happening is companies are doing their marketing reactively. They read a book, they heard someone, they hired a consultant or an agency, and they're doing tactics, but there's nothing in it guiding the tactics. It's like trying to run a marathon, but there's no mapped out route, and there's no finish line. It's like the Barkley Marathon, if you've ever heard of that over in East Tennessee. You're expending energy, but you're not getting anywhere. And so what pains me a lot of times is seeing and talking to the CEOs who have spent tens of thousands of dollars on tactics, their websites and ads and emails, but they've never stopped to define who they're actually targeting or put together a messaging plan to guide what they're saying and ultimately why it all matters to their buyers. And so in this particular stage, the two big things I say that we're going to do is we're going to figure out what to say and what to do in order to grow. And the story part of this is about connecting to your ideal customer. What is the problem that they have that you solve? And being able to communicate to and with them with words that resonate, that matter, that help build trust and ultimately help them move forward in the buying process. And then we connect that to the tactics that get you in front of your target audience with clear messaging that moves them through the process, ultimately to help grow the business by building trust, generating leads, and ultimately creating customers.
Right. So as you said, in our last episode, we gave a very high-level overview of the Guide marketing framework. G is the first letter in Guide, and that is what the details of this podcast are about today. So as we go deeper into this, what you will find in our framework is that we have points underneath each of the main letters that we call guideposts. So within the letter G of our framework, we have 6 guideposts. They're mile markers in a way to let you know that you're on the right path. You're heading in the right direction. So this is based off our Wayfind marketing assessment that we have on our website. That is a free assessment that anyone can go to the website and take right now if you wanted to. And each one of these guideposts answers the question that is posed to you when you take the assessment. So the first one within G is, do you have clear marketing and sales goals for the next 12 months? So unpack this for us. This seems really basic, but obviously people must skip this step or it wouldn't be the first thing you're asking. So give us the deets on this one.
A lot of times what happens here is there might be a specific revenue goal, but then it's not broken down into something that's more meaningful for marketing and sales. So great, you have a revenue goal. You're trying to increase your revenue by 500,000 or $1 million, whatever it might be. How many new customers does that represent? How many new buyers do you need over the next 12 months in order to achieve your goal? And then it's drilling down from there into how many leads do you need? How many proposals need to be given? And there are other metrics that we look at. In particular, we get to the E part of the framework, evaluate and adjust. But you've got to have some goals and they've got to be defined in a way that it's meaningful to both marketing and sales. Otherwise, nobody knows what success looks like. And if it's not written down, it's not real.
How often do you talk with a business owner, CEO, or even a marketing manager, and they say, oh, I have all that, but it's just in my head?
A lot. And I get it. You're busy running a business. And that's why, in particular, frameworks, I love when we get to work with companies that have gone through EOS. It's a business operating framework. It's based on the book Traction by Gina Wickman. And because in that, it forces you as the CEO, as the owner, to work with your team to map out what those goals and metrics are. And so that's always fun, getting to work with folks that have gone through that process because they're already coming to the table with a lot of this defined. And for the folks that don't, no problems. But that's why we want to look at that here and try to better understand what are the goals, what does success look like?
Great. Okay, moving on to guidepost number 2. In the assessment, we ask, do you have a written marketing strategy? There's that word written down again. Do you have a written marketing strategy that aligns with your business goals? So if someone's listening and they don't have a strategy, or they want a strategy, or they think they have a strategy, it's in their head, what are they to do with this next step?
So let me break the strategy. We think about that. That's kind of nebulous. And sometimes that can bring a picture of this really long deck or this really long document that has all this information that you're never going to use. So there's a part of your strategy that is foundational, and you're not going to be reinventing that every quarter. That's the part of your strategy that gets into things like defining who your target audience is, developing marketing personas. What's your key messaging? What does your messaging guide look like based on your different audiences? A lot of times when we're working with somebody, we're going through a SWOT analysis to better understand who they are as a company. What's your brand personality? You have all of these things that are very fundamental and that you're not going to be changing every quarter. At least I hope you're not. And so once you get that part of the strategy down and document it, just get out a notepad and just put some of this stuff down on paper. We can get into developing personas. We've got some content on our website that talks about how to build those out. But you just want to get it written down. It doesn't have to be, if it's not helpful, if it's not useful, don't write it down. You want enough to get clarity to direct your marketing and your messaging. Even if it's, again, I'll mention this as a resource, but EOS has put together what they call their VTO. It's the Vision Traction Organizer. If you go online and search for it, I'm sure you can find it. You're probably watching YouTube videos on how to build this out. And that gets into a lot of business things, but there's a lot there that feeds into a marketing strategy as well.
Yeah. In the D of guide, when we talk about develop and execute a sales plan, we talk a lot about alignment. And it's difficult to have alignment when you don't have some of these things written down, right?
Absolutely. And if you're just looking for super basic marketing plan, write down who's your customer, write down some basic descriptions of who they are and the problem they have that you solve. And then write down a couple of key messages. What are a few things that you might say to that person if you were having a conversation about how you solve their problem, how you're different from a competitor? And then think through a couple of different tactics that would help you get in touch with that audience. Maybe it's using your network. Maybe it's asking for referrals and introductions. Maybe it's something more robust, but at least get some of that down. And that's a good starting point.
Awesome. Okay, let's move to guidepost number 3. We are going to answer the question, are you mapping your marketing to each stage of the buyer's journey? What I think is interesting about this one, Steve, is that I think people assume that they are in kind of a loosey-goosey kind of way, right? But are they really mapping it to the different stages? Talk to us about that.
So the first thing I'll say here is I'm going to use a typical marketing sales funnel. There are any variations out there, but I'm going to talk about the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. And the idea here is that as people go through the steps in the buying process, at each of those stages, they're asking different questions. They're looking for different types of information. If somebody's at the top of the funnel, they recognize they have a problem and they're just looking for basic information, trying to figure out how to solve that problem. They might have to do a lot of educating before they start looking for what you do. Middle of the funnel, they're shifting their questions because now maybe they're starting to look at you. They're starting to look at what services or products you provide, your competitors provide. So they're starting to do some comparison. Well, those are different questions. And then at the bottom of the funnel is where they're really starting to vet out and they're filtering through and narrowing the selection down to a final choice, if anything at all. Sometimes people they just stop. They don't keep going through the process. And so both the questions, so the content that we're creating to answer those questions is going to change based on where they are in the funnel. And so the top of the funnel might be what is or how do I. The middle of the funnel might be a versus you versus your competitor or the best of whatever you do. In the bottom, they're going to be looking at things like case studies and testimonials and getting into the details of what you do versus what your competitors do, evaluating what your processes look like before they make a final decision. Again, that gets a little bit squishy, but the idea is the tactics you use to reach people, the top of the funnel versus the middle versus the bottom is going to change. So you want to know what those things are. So you have the right content, reaching them at the right place at the right time. I'll give you this quick example. It's like somebody's at the top of the funnel or maybe even the middle, they get to your website, they're getting information, but they're not ready to have a conversation. They don't want to schedule a call. They don't want to see a demo. They just want information. Well, if you were having a conversation with them and you kept asking them, hey, do you want to schedule a call? It would almost be akin to being on a first date with somebody and proposing marriage. They're not ready for that. So that's why on your website, it's important to have options for people, not just schedule a call, but for the folks that aren't ready for that, give them something else to do. Give them, again, we're back to creating content that answers questions, that builds trust so that people can start moving through the funnel, build that trust. Then they're more likely to say yes to scheduling a call and taking that next step in the relationship.
I want to circle back to something that you said a minute ago, and that is how in each stage of the buyer's journey, people are asking specific questions. And I just wanted to throw in that from a content marketing perspective, I do search engine optimization, SEO, I do keyword research, and there are keywords that match up to each stage of the funnel, which is also very interesting to point out because you can, on your service pages, or if you have created specific sales pages on your website, you can add an FAQ document, or not a document, but just a section like on the website, not a PDF, but like a full-fledged section at the end of a sales page with the frequently asked questions. That are the questions they're asking at that stage in their buying journey. And especially in a B2B space, one very common high volume term is free trial for, or, brand name free trial. So that's just something to consider when you're thinking through all of that. Like that is a bottom of the funnel keyword that, if you have content and you can address that question, that's just going to be another way to establish more trust between you and this person that's been consuming a lot of your, like if they're at the bottom of the funnel by now, they've been consuming a lot of your content. So let them see behind the curtain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even, we could keep going. I'm going to pause because I'm jumping ahead to I. Know that more when we get to inform with content.
I know. It's so hard not to go to content. It's so fun. Okay, let's move to number 4. Guidepost number 4. Do you have a clear description of your ideal client? Persona development. Let's go, Steve. Tell us, what are all the must-dos, must-haves, and must-knows about knowing who your ideal client is?
The biggest thing about knowing your audience is what's unique about them. What are the unique descriptions that help you communicate to them more clearly about their specific needs? So for instance, I was doing a strategy session with a company last week, and on one hand, they can sell into companies that are doing 100 million in revenue and up. And at that particular company, they're going to be dealing with, they're going to be talking with mid-level managers. They might be talking to a director of marketing or an HR director. Whereas if they go to a smaller company that's 25 to 50 employees, they're having a conversation with the CEO or the owner. So same services, same products, but by understanding those different audiences, not only the role, but the company that they're in, it's a different conversation. It's different pain points. It's different frustrations. And so it's important to get that defined. And the biggest thing here is get clarity on the problem that you are solving. And not only the obvious problem, but think about the internal, the emotion, what goes along with that. When you can start speaking into that, now you're starting to build a deeper connection. The part of the brain that controls emotion is the same part of the brain that makes decisions. And when we connect there, when we understand that, it increases the likelihood that they're going to become a customer.
Yes. And I think this is another one of those things that people will have in their head, but they don't have on paper.
Exactly. A lot of times, if I sit down and I have a conversation with somebody, well, tell me about who your ideal customer is, they can start communicating. But there's often details that would be helpful to them that are locked into their brain that when they're asked the right question, they can articulate. And that's what this does. It helps you get it out because at some point, somebody else on your team needs to know this so that you can collectively be selling and marketing more effectively.
Right. Because when you try to reach everyone, you really reach no one.
Exactly.
People don't want to just commit to a few personas sometimes because they want everyone to want to buy and use their products and services. But you have to be specific. You have to really drill down and nail down like who you are talking to, because we're all bombarded with so many messages and so much noise constantly. Every time we turn on social media or whatever, go to a website that's already running ads to redirect us back to that thing we were checking out before. Like there's so many messages out there vying for people's attention. If you aren't specific, your audience will tune you out.
Well, exactly. When you know your audience and you're more specific, you're more relevant and you're cutting through a lot of that noise and chaos. And
Right.
the other thing that I comment to people about when it comes to marketing and budget and things like that is I have yet to meet the individual or the company that has an unlimited budget to be able to market to everybody. So getting your personas down helps you focus your resources on the customers that are most likely to convert, and it helps you generate a better ROI.
Yes. Yes. That's great. That is great. Okay. So we're on now to guidepost number 5. This one answers the question, have you talked to your customers lately? Okay. That's an interesting one. Tell us about that.
So the reason why this is something that I encourage people to do, we do this for our clients. I was in a strategy session with a client the other day, and they're looking to move into more of a commercial space. A lot of what they do is B2C e-commerce, but they're looking to shift into the corporate space. And the CEO, I gave him a list of questions to go ask the folks who were his target audience. I gave him a list of 10 questions. So he went, he had these conversations, and when we met, he talked about how insightful that was, because this is a mission-driven organization. They have a social impact element of what they do. And so it was very eye-opening to him to better understand how that was perceived and what importance that did or didn't carry with commercial buyers. But he never would have known that had he not had these conversations. So talking to your customers is really a great source to inform your messaging. It helps clarify your personas. A lot of times the words that they give you are really good, clear words to use in your messaging, because it's going to resonate with other people just like them who are your customers or your future customers. And sometimes they will point out things that you didn't realize, either that they really value and appreciate, or that might be a pain point. So there's a couple of different ways that I think CEOs need support. One is they have an in-house marketing person and they're frustrated because they're not getting the ROI from that person. A lot of times that person doesn't have the resources. They don't have a framework. They're very good tactically, but they don't have a framework. They don't have a strategy. So consider maybe a marketing coach, maybe some sort of marketing training program would be helpful or useful for your marketing manager. And you can come in and help cast a vision and make sure that the strategy is aligned. But then from the execution standpoint, they're getting guidance and training to implement and execute. Now, another frustration is where CEO could benefit from support is maybe your current agency talks a good game, but they're not getting results. Or I see this situation a lot of times where the agency becomes their order takers. They come to the CEO. What do you want us to do next? Does the CEO need input? Absolutely. But the marketing partner should be bringing ideas and recommendations to the table and helping give strategic direction, not just taking orders. And then some people, they've not started. They don't know where to go. They're not sure what to do. And so in that case, maybe it's just sit down, have a conversation. Again, go to the assessment. That gives you a reference point on where to get started. And people can always reach out to us through our website for a conversation, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me notes there. But yeah, I mean, I would just say, take the assessment, get your arms around where you are, what you could be doing, and then make determination as to whether you want to do it in-house, whether you want to outsource it, or some combination.
So we've spent the time together talking about generate your story and your strategy and why that's important. What's at stake if you don't do this legwork on the front end?
You're going to end up wasting a lot of time and money. And that leads to a lot of frustration, potentially missing goals, or having to work a lot harder to hit the goals. So take the time, figure out your strategy. And a lot of times strategy is about figuring out what not to do. There's so many choices. There's so many options, so many different ways that you can spend your marketing dollars. There are more than enough people out there who are willing to take your marketing dollars for whatever service they provide. But having a plan can help get that direction. And I do want to say one other thing, because right now, a lot of what we talk about here is very much on building that foundation. And as we go through the rest of this framework, that's really where we're going to unpack the tactical. Because you might be wondering, well, great, if I have this, how do I get in front of people? How do I get more people to my website? What do I do to convert people from my website or in the sales process? What I would say is keep coming back for these next few episodes where we continue to deep dive into this framework. And we're going to talk about what those things are. If you go to our website, wayfindmarketing.com, go to our learning center, you'll find a ton of content there. There's a lot of great resources, checklists. It's a lot of practical information that you can use to guide your marketing efforts and activities.
And if you just set aside, this is something I've heard you say many times, you set aside maybe just 1 hour a week to get started. 1 hour a week, you're going to turn off all the distractions and you're just going to give it your full and undivided attention. 1 hour, start working through some of these. If you haven't really fleshed out your personas, start there. Or maybe you haven't written down your value prop, start there. When you look at these 6 guideposts we've talked about today, There's going to be one that's going to be the, glaringly obvious one. Yeah, we need to do that. Take an hour, carve it out, put it on your schedule, and just maybe for the next several weeks or until you get it done and you feel like it's where it needs to be, commit to that time and it will pay off.
Absolutely. Any forward movement is going to help. Our next episode is going to be focusing on the guide framework, which is upgrade your online presence. So if you have questions about your website or LinkedIn or social media, be sure to come back. We're going to dig in. We're going to talk about things like usability and what type of content should be on your website so that it doesn't suck. And
we don't want websites to suck. That's for
sure.
We are definitely against that. Yes. So thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. We look forward to bringing you some fresh new content again next week. Until then, we'll
see you next week. And don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend who could benefit from what you heard today.